Hello readers! My name is Heidi from Bunburg and the Stacks. I was kind of sitting around lately thinking, you know what my blog doesn't have enough of? Awkwardness! So I figured what better way to introduce that than start vlogging. I don't really know what I'm doing. Sorry if it sucks, this is my first go. I usually do one big rewind book haul post at the end of every month, at least I have been this year. But since I decided I wanted to start vlogging, I thought I would do 2 vlogs, one rewind, one book haul. So this is my book haul for June. First up, after BEA, I headed down to the Strand with some girlfriends. I'd never been before. It's a great new used bookstore in New York City. They have a wonderful YA section, so that was fun to check out. I've always been afraid to go there, even though I've lived here for 4 years, because I thought I would spend heaps of cash, but luckily I restricted myself to only 6 books. First up, I got Tithe by Holly Black. Tithe is a Tam Lin retelling. I've read Holly Black's Curse Workers series. I listened to the audio for it. It's narrated by Jesse Eisenberg. It's one of the best and definitely my most recommended YA series on audiobook, period. It's fantastic. You get Holly Black's amazing world building on top of Jesse Eisenberg's absolutely spot on narration. I couldn't imagine the character as anyone else in my head at the moment. So highly recommended. Really excited to check this one out. Next up, I picked up Keturah and Lord Death by Martine Leavitt. I read her book, My Book of Life by Angel, last year, which is one of those that I really wish more people would pick up. It is a novel in verse. It's recent historical fiction. It covers the sex trade in Vancouver in the 1980s, while there is also a serial killer loose on the streets, so it's partially based on real events, which is actually really disturbing. I felt that reading the novel in verse just let me handle this material that I don't think I could have gotten through in prose. It was really out of the box read for me, a new experience, and I enjoyed it so much. I really have been wanting to read more of her work, so I had to pick this one up. I love personifications of death, as I've said before, and this one of course has death as a character. It's a little beat up, little fray around the edges, obviously used, so I was kind of bummed about that, but I don't mind a little love on my books. Next up, I got Margot Lanigan's most recent short story collection, Yellow Cake. I haven't read her short stories before, but I've now finished this book. I really enjoyed it. Her book, Brides of Verloc Island, was my favorite read last year, and I will be talking about it more in my rewind post. Next up, I headed down to the adult fantasy section looking for some Juliette Marillier. Luckily, I was successful. I got both Wolfskin and The Dark Mirror. Both of these are the first books in 2 different trilogies. Gorgeous artwork on Wolfskin especially. Love it. I'm actually want to look up the cover artist. I feel like it might be the same artist that does Patricia McKillip's book covers, which I'll show you in a second. I love the art. I'm a huge Marillier fan. Love the Seven Waters series, one of my favorites of all time, even though I haven't finished it yet and desperately need to. I'm reading her YA series at the moment. I'm in the middle of Ravenflight, the second in her Shadowfell series. Not loving it as much. Don't know that I'd even honestly read it if I didn't love her so much, but definitely check out her adult work. And as stated, Patricia McKillip, when I found this while I was looking for Marillier, was really excited. I've wanted to read some of her work for at least a year or so now, since she kind of got on my radar. I don't know how it didn't happen before then, because she has a massive backlog. So much so that it was kind of intimidating to know where to start, because she's done so many standalone fantasies, which I love. Like I said, gorgeous cover work. But I ran across a brand new copy of Bards of Bone Plain, perfect condition, $6. It was the only Patricia McKillip they had at the Strand, so decision made. This will be my first one. Now, after the Strand, I drug everybody up to Books of Wonder. Books of Wonder, if you aren't familiar with it, is an awesome children's and young adult independent bookstore in Manhattan. Usually when I do my author event recaps, that's where they take place. I do go to events other places, but that's definitely the big one. I try to buy something every time I'm in. I like to support them. They always have a lot of signed books. Shannon Hale is a friend of the store. I got to see her there a couple months back for a Newbery thing where I got a signed copy of The Goose Girl. I still haven't read it, for which you can all yell at me because I desperately need to. But I was happy to find while I was there that they still had signed copies of Enna Burning. So I went ahead and picked that up. And also, since I was going on a total high from seeing Neil Gaiman that morning, I was pumped to see that they still had signed copies of Neil Gaiman's latest children's book, Tuesday, signed by the author and the illustrator. Really recommend you read this one. It's adorable. Go find it in a bookstore. It takes all of 2 minutes, if that. I had to pick it up. I wanted to go see Gaiman when he was there for this in February, but unfortunately I was out of town. I couldn't go. So I was psyched that they still had this. And then you'd think I would be done for the month, and I should have been. But I had this really good week-long discount at my bookstore, so I couldn't resist picking up just a few more. So first up, I picked up Damned by Chuck Palahniuk. I'm a big Chuck Palahniuk fan. I've read a good chunk of his books, not all of them, because he has a fairly big backlog. Fight Club is probably his best-known work. The movie's actually better than the book, just heads up on that one, at least in my opinion. You can feel free to argue with me if you think I'm wrong. Favorite of his is Rant. If you like time travel books at all, I really recommend Rant. It's really weird and disturbing, as is all his work, but it's my favorite time travel book of all time. It's such a unique look. I really love it. To this day, his short story Guts is the most disturbing thing I've ever read. More disturbing than anything I've read from Margot Lanigan, though she could probably give him a run for his money. So I had to pick up Damned. I haven't read it yet. This was his book he came out with last year, but I picked it up because at BEA I got a copy of Doomed. Doomed is the second book in this series. I'm assuming it's just a duology. He's actually never written a series before, so I was kind of surprised. But I was able to get that signed. I was really excited to meet Chuck at BEA. Next up, I bought a copy of The Monolithic House of Leaves. It's really only about 700 pages long, but it's a heavy 700 pages. I'm probably not going to read it for a while because I'm still burnt out from reading Infinite Jest earlier this year. It was very worth reading, don't get me wrong. Really enjoyed it, especially as a read-along. It was a lot. If you're familiar with the musician Poe, she's actually the author's sister. She has an album that accompanies this book, and I've listened to that album for years, but have yet to pick this up, so I wanted to. My boyfriend mentioned wanting to reread it, so it seemed like a good one to pick up. It's one you definitely want to pick up in a physical copy. It's printed very interestingly. It uses different fonts, has random bibliographies in the middle, there's pages where there's only a little bit of text. There's pages where there's blocks of text. There's pages where the text is, all over the page. So it's definitely an interesting one. Many of you probably are familiar with it, but if you're not, it's worth picking up and flipping through. Very interesting. Next up, I picked up the most recent volume of Fables. This is volume 18. As you know, I'm a huge Fables fan. If you don't know, get on it. Read this series already. Even if you don't like graphic novels, it's amazing. If you like fairy tales at all, even if you don't, I feel like it's such a good play on fairy tales and modernization and twist, and I feel like it'll really surprise a lot of readers. Cubs in Toyland, I've been on hold at the library since December waiting to read this because it's my favorite ongoing series, and it just wasn't happening. So I had my discount, I couldn't resist, I had to pick it up. Then I was going to a book event that evening for Susanna Kearsley Firebird was her most recent release. I picked this up. She was kind enough to sign it for me. She was very sweet. You can look at my event recap from a couple weeks ago. And in addition to her latest Firebird, I also picked up The Winter Sea and Shadowy Horses. Firebird has characters from both these books in it, so even though it can be read as a standalone, all her books are that way. You don't have to read them in any particular order, which I think is great. I love that she purposely does that to help out her readers so that it's easy for them. I figured I wanted to read these first. She suggested I start with The Shadowy Horses because she actually feels like it's the weakest of the three. I'm fine with that, working up, gonna listen to that, and really excited for those. Next up, I went to another book event in the city. This time it was the Fierce Reads Tour with Emmy Rayborn, Lee Bordego, Anna Banks, Jessica Brody, and Jennifer Albin. They were at McNally Jackson in New York City, which is another big independent bookstore. It was my first time there, which was pretty cool. I picked up Shadow and Bone, which Lee was kind enough to sign for me. I'm really nervous about this one. I wasn't going to read it. I had some friends who really didn't like this one. And all of their points were like, yeah, that's really valid. I think that bothered me too. I'm just going to avoid it. But then I have so many other friends who love it. And some of those friends are ones that are also really picky about high fantasy. And I'm like, well, you know, if they love it, then I might too. So I'm always interested to see which side of that I'll fall on. I probably won't actually read this one until the third book comes out next year because that's kind of how I roll. Macmillan sent me an ARC of Altered, the sequel to Jennifer Albin's Cruel. So I took this and had it signed at the event. She was actually signing these at BEA, but I didn't go pick one up because I knew that Macmillan had one in the mail for me. I liked Cruel quite a bit. I think it's just one of those I picked up at the right time. I hadn't been burnt out on dystopian because I hadn't been reading them. And I think that's what burned a lot of other people. I understand a lot of the complaints people had with Cruel, but it was just one of those, it was the right book at the right time for me and I enjoyed it. So I'm excited to see where it goes in Altered. Macmillan was also good enough to send me an arc of Engines of the Broken World by Jason Vanhee. This one doesn't come out till November. Really psyched about it. It looks so creeptastic. I'm probably going to save this one for the fall when you want to start reading those creepy books. I've been really into horror the last couple of years, which is weird development for me because I've never liked being scared. I was never one of those kids. I don't watch horror movies, but I've discovered that horror books are totally my thing. Really excited for that. Then last up from the library, I got Dial H. China Miéville wrote a graphic novel. I was really excited. He's been a really hit or miss for me. I've tried 2 of his books. Really liked Realcy last year, one of my favorite books. I tried to read Unlondon, assuming that I would love it as well. Couldn't get through it. I couldn't do it. This is a graphic novel, so it's short. I'm assuming I won't have a problem getting through it. I'm already a couple pages in. Unfortunately, this series has already been canceled. I haven't heard the best things, but I'm hoping for, at least a 3-star read. It's not bad for an hour's work. So that's it for the actual books. I also just wanted to mention AudioSync. If you haven't been paying attention to me on Twitter, repeatedly telling you about this, AudioSync is a free summer download program where each week they offer 2 YA titles. They are excellent, wonderful productions from people like Listening Library, Brilliance Audio, really quality stuff. I've already gotten free copies of Maggie Stiefvater's Raven Boys, Anna Banks of Poseidon's, Shakespeare's The Tempest, Bronte's Jane Eyre. Every week there's 2. They're fantastic. I try and tweet about it every Thursday is when they go up, and I usually try and give you a little warning on Wednesday too that it's your last day. So pay attention, check out their website. I'll link it below, as well as links to all these books. So thanks for watching, and let me know what you got this month. And in the meanwhile, happy reading!